Our gospel reading on this Epiphany Sunday is, as always on Epiphany, taken from Matthew chapter 2 and verses 1 through 12. Listen to what the Spirit might say to you in this probably pretty familiar reading from the book of Matthew. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born the King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling after the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the tribes of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go, search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word, so that I too may go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, and this is an important line, they left for their own country by another road. May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. I don't know about you, but to me, so much about this story does not make sense. If these guys are so wise, why do they go to the old king and ask about the new king? You wouldn't do that, would you? If these guys are so wise, why did they just see a star one day and say, "You know what? We ought to follow that star. Let's see where it goes, this moving star that we've never seen before. Let's just take our weird gifts and follow." It makes you wonder, doesn't it, what was going on in their lives to make them do such a thing, to leave everything they know and to chase after a star, pack up their telescopes and their charts and their compasses and go following the star. What's the backstory? Tell me about your mother. Tell me about your spouse, maybe. There's got to be a reason that anybody would do such a strange thing. There's got to be some explanation. Maybe it was dissatisfaction. Maybe they weren't happy with their lives such as their lives were. Maybe it was that old dissatisfaction tugging at their sleeves, begging them to just venture out and do something new, calling them to follow. You know, contentment is a beautiful thing. It's one of the best things, actually. But there's also this holy dissatisfaction that calls us out of our ruts, that calls us out of the life that we've always had, sheds a new light on things, and asks us to do something different. Rise up out of our darkness and follow a new light, a different light in the same old sky. You felt it, don't tell me you haven't. We've all felt dissatisfaction with our lives the way they are. Whatever it was that churned in the restless spirits of those ancient magi, I'm sure it's the same thing that churned in the spirits of the Vikings when they loaded up their dragon-shaped galley boats and sailed for the horizon, not knowing if they would just sort of drop off the edge of the world or meet real dragons. And decades later, I'm sure they sat by their firesides and told their old man stories about it. Stories of sea and sky and storm. Dissatisfaction. It's a driving force in the world. It might be one of the mothers of invention, if anything can have more than one mother. Dissatisfaction. It's what called our forebears, many of us, our forebears, out into the wilderness, away from everything they knew, braving the French and justifiably unhappy Native Americans, just to escape the reach of bishops and kings. They wanted no more bishops and no more kings, not a Barnes and Noble in sight, not a Starbucks either, but nor were there bishops and kings out here. I have a friend out west, and this explains my absence last week. I have a friend out west who has been begging me for decades, to go backpacking with him in Utah. He loves Utah. He likes deserts and barren places and mountains and heights. And so on Christmas Day, I flew out to join, or the day after Christmas, I flew out to join him for some very cold nights in a national park that shall remain nameless. We accidentally broke a few laws, and this is going onto the internet, so it was accidental. We didn't know you weren't supposed to have fires in the desert out there. It was cold. We didn't know that the place he found on Google Earth and really wanted to discover was off limits to the public for soil protection and soil study. Who knew there were ancient soils that are still undisturbed? They're disturbed now. I guess that was strike one. We had a jolly old time in the forbidden place. It was beautiful, and it got down to 13 degrees or 15 degrees overnight. So I made a roaring fire with some of those dry trees they've got all over the desert. Strike two, you might call that. And when we wearily trudged 12 miles back to the car, because we had to pack all our water in, there was a park ranger waiting for us at the car. He said that my friend had not purchased the correct permit, and if we didn't come back that night, they were going to send the helicopters out looking for us, and we'd have to pay for it, which might qualify as strike three. But it was quiet out there, and it was beautiful among those red rocks. I probably won't go back. I'm more a creature of the forest, and I love water. But being out there recalled to both of us the adventures we used to take in college when we were young, and the world was so big and just waiting for us to discover it. That feeling of adventure, that wanderlust, that desire to go, just go, anywhere, just up and go. I tell you, or perhaps you know, once the Star of Bethlehem has shined its dissatisfied light into your life, you can never go back to the thing you were. It calls you forward to something else, something new, and you don't go back. And the following becomes a quest, a lifelong yearning, a drive, a desire. You become a seeker. And then you start seeking other things. It's a way of life. Is the Star of Bethlehem shining its rays on your life today, in this new year? It's a great time to follow, to resign yourself to the life of a wanderer and a seeker. When the Star of Bethlehem sheds its rays upon you, you've got a choice to make. You can take a risk and do a scary thing and get up and follow, or you can spend the rest of your safe life wondering what life would have been for you if you had followed when the time was right. The unloved job, the unhappy relationship, the irredeemable tedium of a directionless life, the addictions, the solitude, all the rankings of class and clan and society, the bishops and kings that the old world forces upon us, all that we long to escape. The only way to stay the same sometimes, and I'm learning this from age, the only way to stay the same sometimes is to change. We all know that you have to change to get better, but we have to learn the fact that sometimes you have to change just to stay the same. We can only stay healthy and true to our identities, true to ourselves, true to our callings, if we adapt and follow new lights. That new light, that sacred star. Maybe once in a lifetime, maybe 2 or 3 times. It sheds its dissatisfied light upon you. Its splendor pierces the shadow of our minds and hearts and our habits. Arise, it says. Your light has come. It's time to go. Let's get out of here. It will beckon us to a journey of discovery, a trek fueled by passion, desire, longing, dissatisfaction. And once you've given your energies to chasing stars, well, you're never quite normal again. But despite the discomfort of the journey, it's better. You're better because of it, and you make the world better because of it. It's a forward call. It takes us all sometime. Make a change in order to be true to who you are. Make a change even just to stay the same. When have you, like those wise dreamers of old, when have you gone chasing after a star? That's a real question. Think about it. When have you taken a risk and made a big change in your life that really had to happen? You could have not done it, but you did it, and it worked. In a relationship, with a career, with moving to a different city, with whatever it is. When did some new and enlightening thing break into the darkness of the night skies above your life and bid you change, risk alienation, leave what you think makes you safe and comfortable, and do this other thing? And you, like some resistless magus, for that is the singular of magi, a magus, got up and followed. You heeded the deep rumblings of dissatisfaction in your own spirit, and you collected up your strange treasures, the gifts you had, and you followed. Perhaps you took a risk on a relationship that you have never since regretted. Maybe you made a move to some far-off place. Maybe you changed careers. Such is the calling. It's interesting that here as a baby, Jesus is already calling people. Long before he showed up on the beaches of Galilee with such urgency and bid those simple fishers, follow me. Leave your boats and your nets, all the stuff you know. Let the dead bury their dead. Lay down the tools of your trade, the implements of a passing world, and come do something new. Follow me. When we give in to our holy dissatisfaction with the darkness inside of ourselves and in our world, when we chase after that holy light that makes us uneasy with what we're seeing, then we come home to ourselves by another road. We come home to ourselves in a whole new way, and we bear that light with us. Following the light entails risk and fear, but it makes us whole. Maybe seekers heal the world. I don't know. What makes people come to church? Is it a holy dissatisfaction? Is it because your friends are here? Is it because you like to sing? I think at least at its core, most people know that religion is at least supposed to be a forward call in our lives to something better, to something brighter, to something that will heal us and our world. It doesn't always act that way, but it's supposed to be. And when it's working well, it is. Maybe we come at least in part because we know that in its sometimes frightening treasure box, faith holds not gold and frankincense or myrrh, but twin truths about ourselves, that we are really just dust, but that we are the beloved of God. Humility and purpose. Those are two very healing things in a person's life. Whatever your age, there's always a new journey. There's always a new venture. There's always a new light beckoning you to follow. I think about these magi and the light that shed its rays over their Persian observatory, tugging at their imaginations. These long ago magi, whoever they were, a new light in an old sky, calling these old soothsayers away from everything that made them feel safe, away from themselves, I don't know, what do magi do? Divination? Magic? Zodiacs? Astrology? Astronomy? Aromatherapy? Reflexology? I don't know what they do. They're secret arts, but it was who they were. It was what made them them. They were the wrong people in every way. They were the outsiders. They were the Gentiles. They were pork eaters. They were pagans. But new light makes us see new things and act in new ways, doesn't it? New light makes new demands. It calls us away from ourselves. It calls us to things that we might not think are right. The new light called them out away from everything that gave them power and identity, out past the edges of their towns, out where nobody spoke their language, out where they weren't known. Something outside of them was calling to them. And they might have been waiting for that call their whole lives. And so they followed. You know, in his well-known poem, The Journey of the Magi, T.S. Eliot depicts the wise men as agitated, anxious, uncomfortable during their long trip to Bethlehem, but especially when they get home. They've come back to the old places that they knew so well, but everything that they had seen and heard on their journey had changed them. Seeing Jesus had made them strange. They couldn't relate anymore to people back home. It saddled them with a new urgency, a new responsibility, a new vision for how life ought to be. And the poem says, "All this was a long time ago, I remember. I would do it again." One of the magus says, a magus says, looking back on his life. But he asks, what did we see out there? A birth or a death? And that's the case, isn't it? That's always the case with Jesus and the story of Jesus. You have to die to the old to be born to the new. You have to die to what no longer works to be born to what will. You have to follow the star. Our old ways of life have to die so a new one can be born. And we are no longer at ease, the famous line in that poem, no longer at ease with the world that we knew. And that's a good journey, the one that changes you, the one that costs you, the one that strips away your old pretenses and the things that you think make you safe. There's a holy dissatisfaction that sometimes calls us to a new light in an old sky. You know, the church has got to change. I don't want to admit that because I've got a lot invested in the way things are. But the church has got to change in order to stay the same, much less to get better. The church has got to change. The decline in the post-pandemic church has truly been a real grief and a source of some paralysis for me. What do we do? What do we do? But there are stages in grief. There comes a stage where you realize, okay, it's not going to be as it was, but we got to move forward. We got to do something else. We got to get out of this rut. And I think I am personally ready to tackle that conversation. And I hope that some of you will help me. I've got some ideas, but they're sort of half-baked. And I'm hoping you will have some insights too, as we think about how we change in order to stay the same, in order to get better. But you too, probably, whoever you are, you too probably need to change something important. And this is a great time to do it. You too must change in order to be true to yourself, your identity, your calling, the person you are. Change to stay the same. It's painful, but it's the cost of new birth. It's the cost of new life. Well, I got a magus here. Here he is in his ridiculous bathrobe, carrying, I don't know, his mom's jewelry box, wearing a Burger King crown. He looks a little ridiculous, but maybe seekers always do. Maybe you look a little ridiculous when you follow stars, but it worked for him apparently. There's a different light in the same old sky today. Do we pull the curtains and try to hide from it, or do we get up and follow it? Take our strange gifts, our odd treasures, and follow. Let the ones who follow us, who come after us, say, well, they saw this star in the sky, and they followed it. Amen.